Okay, I'm trying to print something up here, and the Aquila Pros, it's just frozen. There's absolutely no error message on the screen. The buttons, the screen is frozen. The the whole thing's just frozen. I have no idea why. So I'm gonna shut it off, and let's see if we get a chance to, like a power loss recovery, something or other. Let's see. Will we get a power loss recovery? And no. No, we won't. Now that I've been using this printer for a couple months, I thought I would do a follow-up video, kind of like a final review. It's definitely not going how it started. The video you just watched I was just doing a normal print, and the printer, it just stopped for some reason. Have no idea why. There was no message on the screen, and I don't know. I don't know what happened to it. I mean, I restarted the printer and I could print something else, but that doesn't help you when you're, 3/4 of the way through another print. So let's start with some positives about the printer. One positive is the bed is slightly larger than the Aquila X2. It's a 235 by 235, which is fine. I've never used the full size of the bed, and I've never used the full size of the bed of my Aquila X2. I did like the, I don't know really what you want to call it, auto bed leveling, or it has a servo arm with a little micro switch at the end of it to do, I guess, build a bed mesh. That was a nice feature. I've never had a problem with, I've never had first layer problems with this printer. Never had a problem with anything sticking. Never had a problem with anything coming loose during a print. I just clean the glass bed, print right on top of it, and that's it. I don't use any glue, hairspray, or any of the other, bed adhesion tricks. So I guess that's probably the best thing about it, is the auto bed leveling feature. The next positive thing about this printer was the Wi-Fi. Now, it's a positive, but it's also negative. So I'll just talk about both of those right now. It was positive because you can connect your printer to your home Wi-Fi network, and then using Voxel Maker, you can just connect right to the printer and send a file right from the slicer. I never tried connecting to it through Cura or Pusa Slicer, so I don't know if that's possible. But yeah, it was a positive. I enjoyed that feature. Now to the negatives. That does not always work. I would say probably most of the time, at least 75% of the time, I would turn the printer on and the Wi-Fi would never reconnect. I would go into my router settings to see if my router could even see the printer, and it wouldn't. I don't know anything about the Wi-Fi chip that's on here, so I just don't, it's closed source firmware, so I don't know anything about the Wi-Fi feature on this printer. It didn't work 3/4 of the time. And then sometimes the screen would say that the Wi-Fi was connected, it would show the little Wi-Fi symbol. But then you go into Voxel Maker and you try to connect to the printer, the IP address would show up briefly, and then you go to click on it to connect it, and it would disappear. Or it just wouldn't connect. It would see the address and just wouldn't connect at all. Um, One of the other problems with the Wi-Fi on this thing is that um, it was difficult to get connected. So in the times where I'd turn it on and I'd wait 5 minutes for it to try and connect, and it wouldn't connect. And after 5 minutes, I'd go in to try and put my password in, and I know I'm putting my password in correctly because I'm doing it 4 or 5 times, and it just would not connect to the Wi-Fi network. I tried on my primary network is both 5G and 2G. I uh, I tried my guest network, which is just 2.4 gigahertz, and I just could not get it to connect. So a bonus is that it does come with Wi-Fi, but the downside, and it's great when it works, but the downside is it, the Wi-Fi sucks because it won't stay connected to the network. It won't reconnect when you turn the printer on. It won't, it takes 4 or 5 tries to get the password in, and I found that trying to put the password in with my finger on the touch screen most of the time screwed up the password. At least I'm guessing it did. I had more success using one of those fancy pens, the touchscreen, touchpad pens or whatever. Um, it was a lot easier to put the password in like that. So, yeah, password Wi-Fi was nice, but most of the time it didn't work. Let's talk about the firmware. So, I tried connecting to the printer with Pronterface through USB cable, um, and it wouldn't connect. So this printer runs off closed source firmware, and if you go to the VoxLab website and you download the firmware, you open the folder. After you download it, you'll see a bunch of files in there. There's like 10 files, 8 or 10 files in there. Um, they're like tar, whatever. I don't know anything about those file extensions. Um, so yeah, it's closed source firmware. It's not open source. You can't you can't modify anything. You can't even do a PID tune on the hot end. So if you ever wanted to change your hot end to something else, or replace your nozzle with a Titan nozzle or whatever, something fancy other than a brass nozzle, or you want to change your heat break, well, you're out of luck because you just can't do a PID tune. There's no option to do that. Um, the the controls, they were okay, but with all these missing all these options, it just sucked. Um, I wish they would have gone with open source firmware, because then I'm sure someone would have made a special Marlin for this printer, um, and it could have been great. Just like the Alex firmware for the X2, or the you know Mr. Sock Professional firmware or whatever. I don't know. Um, but anyways, being closed source, there was just nothing you could do about it. So you're stuck with what it is. So I was on version 1.46, which was the latest. At some point, I reverted back to 1.45, and and everything was working fine at that point. And then all of a sudden, the printer just started acting up and being goofy, and so I basically was forced to update to 1.46. And yeah, I mean, it printed okay, but being closed source firmware, you can't really make any adjustments to it. So, and I know, part of being in the 3D printing hobby is the ability to tinker. That's a big bonus for the hobbyists. So where are we at today with this printer? Well, I put Clipper on the printer, but in order to do that, I had to replace all the guts of the printer. I had to replace the main board. I had to replace the screen. Well, I just took the screen off. You couldn't use it. I at first tried to install Clipper on the board because the main board does have an N32 chip, the same chip that's in the Aquila X2. However, the main board is a lot different. Here's a photo of the main board. As you can see, completely different than the Aquila X2 board. Um, Basically, all your stuff on at the extruder at the hot end and at the on the x-axis, they all connect through ribbon ribbon cables to these points right here. So you don't have individual connections for like your hot end, for your thermistor, or anything like that. There was a breakout board at the hot end where your fans, your servo, um, your thermistors, and basically your everything plugged into, and then it just all went back to this board, to one of these connectors. Um, the Y and the Z stuff has individual connections, which worked out fine. But uh, yeah, and as you can see, what's missing here is there's no. You can see right here. I think this is where a micro SD card slot could have gone, and then potentially this looks like maybe a USB right here. But as you can see, there's none of that. Um, I'm not sure, but I think the uh, the main board for the screen, when you put a file, I don't know if it was printing right off the USB stick or if it was actually moving the file to the board. And then when you would send a file to the printer over Wi-Fi, I don't know if it was going to the board for the screen or going to the main board for the printer. So like I said, I tried putting Clipper on this board and it wouldn't do it. So, I mean, nothing basically happened. I mean, I don't know if there's like a bootloader missing. I'm not a computer guy, so it basically, if you know, if it doesn't flash like all the other printer boards that I've done, then I don't know what to do about it. So, anyways, yeah, I got a spare board and a screen and a breakout board. So, if anybody wants it, just reach out.